Good lunchtime, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. My name is Michal Horecký, volám sa Michal Horecký a je mi cťou, že vás môžem privítať na dnešnej debate tu v stane Európa. This discussion will be held in English language. I hope, is it fine for everybody, please? Yes, perfect. I knew that. It's a pleasure. I'm very happy to announce this discussion on the topic of refugees and other issues as well. Michal is my name, as mentioned, and I have three distinguished guests here on the stage with me today. And I will start with Rasha Abbas in the middle, because she came from very far away. This is her first time in Slovakia. Rasha Abbas is a Syrian young writer and journalist, and she lives in Berlin in Germany. She published 2 collections of short stories. She already has some fans. Maybe you read some interviews with Rasha in Deník N or SME, which were published this week. We are very happy to have her with us here, and I hope she will enjoy it. Rasha writes in Arabic language, but speaks fluently, of course, English. And her book, The Invention of German Grammar, came out in Germany. And that's why I could read it, and you will have a chance to discover this book in the evening when she has one more event in the literary stage. Martin is right around the corner. So Rasha, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, please give her a big hand for coming to Slovakia. I do believe maybe Rasha will be the first Syrian person seen by many of you here in Slovakia. Right next to me Zuzana Števulová, who was born in Martin and is a lawyer. Zuzana is a favorite person of Robert Kaliňák, our Minister of Interior, who is personally dealing with her quite a couple of times in the past, but she is director of the Human Rights League, Liga pre ľudské, práva, which she co-funded, ktorú pomáhala založiť. And just very recently, ladies and gentlemen, Zuzana was awarded by John Kerry in United States of America, not by Barack Obama, but almost by Vice President John Kerry. She was awarded the State Secretary's International Women of Courage Award, takže je to niečo ako cena za odvahu, ktorá sa udeľuje ženám, to women around the globe who have, I quote, demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership in advocating for peace, justice, human rights, gender equality and women's empowerment, often at a personal risk. Takže s nasadením nebezpečenstva, rizika áno, je to veľký potlesk. Minister Kaliňák still didn't recognize her qualities, but John Kerry already did, so that's also something. Congratulations on that. And last but not least, with us on the stage today is Martin Dubéci, who is from Košice, and which is something like Bratislava of the Eastern Slovakia. And Martin studied political science in Brno, Copenhagen, and London. So he is a well-educated political analyst and activist. Right now, after being disappointed by the political party Sieť network, which existed for about 2 months as a normal party, and then basically disappeared, so he tried to become a member of parliament. He was a candidate in March of this year. Only 80 votes. He was far from being a parliament member. Iba 80 hlasov mu chýbalo, so if you would put all the audience together, you could have been there, Martin. But next time, I'm sure next time you will have another chance. Martin was one of those who initiated Plea for Humanity, Výzva k ľudskosti, petition which got quite a recognition in Slovakia. Over 12,000 people signed. He will maybe talk about it later. And yeah, he writes for various websites and blogs and so on. So Martin, it's great to have you here. Please applause for Martin as well. Maybe he's too good. Maybe he's too good for Slovak Parliament, or Slovak Parliament is too good for Martin. Hard to say. So okay. So maybe Rasha, I would start with you, if I may. You are from Syria, but I think the image of Syrians in Slovak media is something very different from what I know about you from your writing, from your book collection of stories. And your father was an engineer, your mother studied French literature, and you were educated well, you were writing for newspapers, working for television. You live a very similar lifestyle as I think most of the people around here more or less do, and so not what the cliche image of a Syrian could be. How would you describe the main reasons why suddenly, after 28 years living in Syria, in Damascus, you had to leave and you had to come to Europe and you are now living in Germany?
Well, first, I think this image you are talking about, it's not just in Slovakia. I was surprised to see it in lots of other countries. And actually, I got lots of questions like why I don't cover my hair or when did you take your hijab? Like it's really everywhere. And why I decided to leave Syria, it's simply my friends start disappearing. So, and people I was working with and everything, so I was really concerned then about my safety, and especially if they are in detention, so it can reach me easily after this. So then I decided to go for a while and stay in Beirut and watch from outside, and to come back when I feel the time is good and I can be safe, but this time never came, and since then I stayed out of Damascus.
So basically the Syrian refugees first start to get to the neighboring countries,
Yes.
and then they try to get Germany. How was your way? Because it's still very far away. So, and there are all sorts of ways. We see all these dramatic pictures from the media, but you came basically. You had a visa as well, as far as I know. And so, how did it happen that you had this different way and a different chance?
I love this.
Yes,
It's the Moldau.
It's just,
Yeah.
yes, they're singing My
Yeah.
Country. They're playing My Country for you.
Yeah.
Navlast.
Yeah, and so I was among the lucky ones. Actually, I did not have to cross this deadly route by land or by sea. I was back then in Beirut, and I was trying to figure out what I want to do, like maybe moving to Turkey or so. And then it came this opportunity. I got a writing fellowship in Stuttgart, Germany by Academy Schloss Solitude. So it was easy for me. It's all the time like this, like when you have a little bit of more privilege, you have more opportunity to be safe and to get your way easily. So for other people, we're not that lucky.
We'll talk more about your book and your writing in the evening, but maybe you could describe, because there is this word now which Slovaks didn't know really before, integration, like how to get integrated into a new society, into a new community. So how are you getting integrated into the German society? And do you want to get integrated?
I'm still trying. Yeah. Well, actually, I think there are some problems when we use a word like integration. I don't see it like you have to go and melt in the new society. Like, it's okay to have some of your old cultural aspects, or it's based on your free choice, as long as they are not opposite the values of your new society. And I really think like the best way to integrate is simply like working in your new society and trying to find your own way, and during that time you are communicating with people. It's never done by teaching you what you like, because I can sit for 2 hours and hear the information about like the politics and history of the country, but that is never integration. Unless you are studying or working, this can be the real integration. Yeah.
I think still it's much easier to get integrated into German society than the Slovak one. And with this, I get to Zuzana. Zuzana, let's imagine for a second that Rasha Abbas would try to come to Slovakia, not to Germany. You are laughing already, so just let's give people some views on this. What is the major difference? We know there are tens of thousands of people coming, refugees from Afghanistan, from Syria, from other regions of war, and they are more or less welcomed. What would happen in Slovakia with Russia?
Well, I actually must be positive because Russia is not something we call typical case, and as she said, she was granted a visa. So basically, this is the only legal way how can you enter basically every EU state, including Slovakia, legally, that you will try to get a visa or residence permit. So, but it's obviously very difficult. So you will have to have a specific purpose. Russia had a scholarship, an invitation, but if you don't have this, so if you do not have a foundation or employer or somebody who can invite you to come into the EU, it's basically impossible for you to come. So if Russia wouldn't be a writer admitted to Stuttgart by a scholarship, she would have to come to one of the embassy and tell them that, okay, I am a Syrian, I come from, let's say, Damascus, and I am afraid of my life, and I would like to come to Europe to apply for asylum. So the answer will be no, this is not a valid reason to get a visa or any type of residency. So in that case, she will be forced, if she will be in danger, she will be forced to take illegal routes because there is no other route for her.
You know, the right-wing parties in Slovakia, which are getting more and more popular, are constantly talking about illegal migration. You founded the Human Rights League just to explain to people, just to fight for the rights, for the human rights of the even refugees and other minority groups or people in danger. So how are you involved exactly in these cases? Because we know the Slovak attitude, the official government attitude is like we want zero quota, we don't want any new refugees in our country. How did you respond to this development, which really was surprising for many of us?
Well, basically we found it already in June last year, the initiative which is called Mediterranean Sea is Our Sea Too, and the aim of the initiative is to somehow provide the objective information about asylum and migration, and also to explain what is a refugee status, and to call on the government to actually admit refugees to come on our territory, either by the system of the distribution, which is called quota, which is internal EU distribution, or by resettlement, which is another way how to legally invite refugees and welcome them in their society, that you offer them a legal way to come directly from the overcrowded refugee camps, let's say in Lebanon or Turkey or somewhere else, to come legally to the country. So there are many ways, and we are trying to provide more information about the possibilities that are actually there and are existing and which can be used to actually change the people's mind and opportunities they have, because currently, as I told you previously, there are very limited legal opportunities for a very limited number of people like Russia who are having the opportunity. But there is a vast majority of Syrians, Afghans, Iraqis, people, let's say, from Somalia, Eritreans, who are having very bad tyranny in their country, and they cannot come legally. So UNHCR, UN Office for Refugees, is saying that in general there are 20 million refugees at the world currently, and out of them, like 10% very urgently needs resettlement. They need some safe place to come. So 10% of 20 million. And there are legal ways how to provide those people with the safety, and we are trying to advocate for those legal ways to be open.
Martin, Zuzana is doing this advocacy, trying to explain to Slovak society, to Slovak public, that we could invite some people to stay or have a permanent residency in our country, and you decided last year that you will also try to reach some critical mass publicly, and you started this petition with a group of friends, and you organized a demonstration at the main square in Bratislava, and you got a lot of media attention as well. So do you think that this is also a way how to convince Slovak society that, well, we can do it, we can make it?
Yeah, hi everyone. I kind of, you have this t-shirt, Bratislavská kaviareň, and there's that saying about Slovaks, I cannot translate, about a certain group in Slovakia who are pro-refugee, like they are slniečkári, which I don't know what's the correct translation.
Sunshine people or something like a hippie, sunshine hippie people.
In my experience, I don't really think that, it's such a minority view in the Slovak society. We should not embrace this self-inflicted opinion that, okay, this is a fringe opinion, nobody really cares except people who come to Pohoda about refugees. It's not right, because really, even during the plea for humanity, but even throughout my campaign and throughout, other people's experiences, you have seen an amazing coalition of people from, and you never seen this before in Slovak civil society, from like Christian groups up to really hardcore liberal groups who have, created a coalition of people who want to help, and also, people who support those groups were on board with them. So there was a wide range of groups groups of people who were in support of refugees. And what's the real problem here is the way how, the civic society from the grassroots wants to have a conversation and tries to push some agenda forward and push some arguments forward. It's okay, but on the other hand, if you have like mainstream politicians, people who are in the cabinet who have like huge megaphones at their mouth, and their opinions are everywhere, so it's really difficult to have the conversation if they are saying that, okay, you should be afraid, you should be afraid, you should be afraid. If you have politicians and people who are like officials in national security telling you that you should be afraid, then it's really difficult to turn this opinion around. So I don't think it's not the result of the fact that there is nobody who is in support of this opinion, but the elites, I would say, the political elites are not brave enough to have a honest and sober conversation about this issue. And just like a short example for that, you have seen this during the Brexit debate in the United Kingdom. I will use it always as an example. People can go really crazy if politicians start to say crazy arguments. And the debate that was about economic benefits of staying in the EU suddenly turned to immigration because Boris Johnson went crazy. In Slovenia, which was a country much more affected by the migration road, you had a much more sober and honest conversation about migration, and no far-right groups popped up, and you had like tens of thousands of people crossing through Slovenia in July, August, and September. So to me, you will have kind of a conversation and kind of an atmosphere as your elites will try to create. And if you want to have a toxic debate, then you will have a toxic debate, and toxic arguments will be picked up by people.
Martin, you come from a city of Košice, which used to be a Hungarian, German, Jewish, Slovak city with a very mixed identity. You yourself in your family have a very mixed relatives, and from the eastern part of Slovakia, almost everybody has some migrants. Slovak history is a history of migration. United States, Canada, South America, Western Europe. Was it a huge big surprise for you that suddenly this last year people really freaked out because of the migrants? Even they hardly ever meet, and they know from personal history that there is a migration sometimes which is forced by the war or by the totalitarian regimes and so on.
But it's kind of interesting, and maybe you remember that during the summer, Slovak economic migrants in Switzerland have signed a petition that they don't want any migrants in Slovakia, which was kind of, I don't think that hard matters and facts matter that much in this debate. Like, it's no matter if you have a mixed heritage or you are from a multicultural city. Most people, and this was something that was pushed forward by the government, said that, oh no, they are economic migrants, it's their own bad luck that they are in a crisis, it's not our responsibility to take care. And again, I mean, if you have a major Slovak politician who himself was an economic migrant and now he's pushing an anti-migrant agenda. What can you do about it? You know, it's simply just, I don't think that this really plays any role in this discussion.
Rasha, writers have a long tradition of living and writing in exile, and exile also can mean a trauma, and you are far away from your home country, you're far away from your language, you're far away from your relatives. How do you deal with this part of this? Because on the one hand, it's great that you made it to Germany, it's great that you were invited by a prestigious literary house, and you got published, which is for a young writer amazing achievement, especially in such a huge literature as a German literature is. But it also has maybe this dark side. So how is it in your case?
Well, I try to use denial at first, like trying to convince yourself you are missing nothing, you have no history, you have no roots, you are living here and focusing on what's happening in the present. For sure, a technique like this will not last so long after this, but you will then discover that you are really missing everything, missing like your country with all the horrible thing. It was there. It's like where I spent the first 28 years of my life. I think now if I got to visit my old neighborhood, I will go crazy. But on the other hand, you cannot just surrender to this kind of thoughts. So then you learn how to make a balance between not forgetting what's happening so you can try to help or do anything, not just forgetting you are Syrian and all these things still happening there, but also trying to focus a little bit on your new life as you are going to stay forever in Germany. Because if you did not think this way, you will do nothing and you will not be advanced in nothing. So you kind of learn to do this balance.
You come from Syria, a country which was also partly influenced by the Soviets, as Czechoslovakia was. And maybe you could say, because last day you spent yesterday in Bratislava, and you said that Petržalka reminds you of some settlements in Damascus or Latakia, and maybe you could say something about this connection, which might be a surprise for some of our guests here.
Well, sure, it started with the UFO bridge, because, you know, we got this thing, for example, in literature, because back in time when it was a must to glorify the Soviet space adventure, it got crazy, this science fiction literature and everything. And even in Syria, like you could find like just in the middle in all serious political programs on TV, suddenly like a program about science fiction phenomena and something like this. So it was so funny for me seeing this UFO bridge, and also the architecture, because it was also so familiar in Syria, those pre-made kind of building with just focusing on the practical need of the building. So it reminds me a lot of Damascus. I even see it in some parts of Berlin as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about if you one day maybe would like to go back home and try to maybe rebuild your country, or because the history of Syria, just to put it shortly, is really very complicated, and the regime got very radicalized, and then the civil war broke up. So it's gonna probably take a very, very long time, and it seems like the world is a bit desperate to find a solution. Like the Russians are not really cooperating with NATO, and it's not clear if they will be able to fight ISIS and so on. So what is your view? Do you ever dream about going back, or you think it's like never-ending conflict? How do you view this?
Well, to be honest, I'm not so optimistic because things are still crazy and it doesn't seem it will end so soon. I hope I'm wrong with this, but till now I'm not really optimistic about what's happening. About the idea of coming back or stay, here again you are struggling with two ideas. The first one is your personal taste, your personal wish. In that case, I would sure prefer believing in a more free society and everything. But also you have a responsibility, because when everything will end at some point, you will have a country rising from ashes and it needs to be rebuilt. And then you have a responsibility. It's not just like a personal wish where I do prefer to live. So, you have to respond somehow. And I think when this time, I'm not sure yet about what I will do exactly, and it's about the opportunities you have, but I think I will be responding to this and maybe going back. I don't know.
Zuzka, you also already mentioned some data, how many refugees we have right now in the world, and how many of them urgently need to go somewhere else. And obviously the situation needs an international cooperation, because now it seems like states are like Turkey or Lebanon are not able to deal with this on their own. How do you see from your professional perspective the will of Europe to work together? Because it seems like we are so weak as hardly ever before in the last decade. So this is the Slovak perspective, but we also should not forget the European perspective. So how do you see the chances that we will find a way how to deal with it together?
Well, I think nowadays, like European Union is a little bit on crossroads because in Slovakia we very much focus on the situation here and about our perception of migration and asylum and refugees, etc., and our response. But truly, this discussion has a much more of a global aspect than of Slovakian aspect, because it's not only about the EU, but EU is basically one of the most powerful blocs around the world, and it's setting an example of how to treat the refugees all around the world. So it has been setting an examples in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, etc., etc. So those states who actually are having 2/3 of world refugees on their territories are following the developments in the EU. So it means when the EU will decide that we will go away from the principles we were selling in abroad as well as at home, it will be an important sign for those countries like Kenya, like Jordan, like Lebanon, because if we are asking ourselves why we should be responsible for the Syrians coming through the sea, I mean, what can Lebanon say? Why the Lebanon should be responsible for those people? Why Jordan should be responsible? Just because of their geographical position, that they are neighboring Syria? So, and we can see it nowadays in Kenya, and what worries me very much is that a few months ago, 2 months ago, Kenya announced that Kenya is going to shut down the biggest refugee camps in the world, which are housing Somali refugees for 20 years. The conflict in Somalia is never ending. The generations of refugees are living, they were even born outside of their country, right? And Kenya has been hosting them for 20 years. And Kenya was hoping that other countries from the global north, which is like EU, Canada, USA, Australia, and others, will help them with at least some percentage to resettle them into other countries. Nothing like this happened, and Kenya said 2 months ago, okay, we are going to close the camps. You should go home, or wherever you want to go. You will not stay at Kenyan territory. And I am asking if thousands and hundreds of thousands of people will be forced to leave Kenya. They have nowhere to go. If Lebanon or Jordan or Turkey will say, okay, nobody is helping us, we are closing the camps, we are asking the people to go away, we don't care where. It will be a huge destabilization of the regions, and this will have serious consequences not only for the regions, but also for Europe. So what we are not really emphasizing very much in our national discussion is that the fact that how the Europe will act, will enforce and influence the developments also outside our region, and those will be the regions where there is the majority of the refugees and where are the countries who are very fragile. So if they will be overcrowded, if the burden will be too much, those fragile countries can easily collapse.
Zuzana, many human rights activists are heavily criticizing this deal Europe with Turkey about like we will give you more and more money so that you keep the refugees there basically, more or less. What's your view on this cooperation?
Well, in my view, like I understand that the EU leaders needed a political signal. So EU-Turkey deal is basically a political signal to home countries that we can deal with the migration, we will reduce the numbers. And it worked, obviously. What I think from the human rights perspective is that in this perspective, the treaty will not suffer the judicial examination. Eventually, there will be some judgments from the European Court of Human Rights in individual cases that will say that returning people to Turkey is against the human rights law because it is against the principle of non-refoulement and protection from torture, because Turkey cannot be considered to be a safe third country according to our human rights standards. But unfortunately, I mean, it's always like this, you make a political decision and justice is slower. So I guess the politicians, they already have fruits from this deal because the numbers have decreased. Unfortunately, the human rights consequences will be huge, and eventually when the treaty will not be possible to be used anymore because of the judgments, I think it will be already too late for individual people whose human rights are constantly violated, and this is very shameful.
Martin, you wanted to respond? Or?
But also there's a thing about the real execution of the deal, because one thing is money, but the other thing is the fact that we have promised refugees that don't take the irregular Turkish Mediterranean route because it's dangerous and it's not controlled. We don't want that. You will be returned back from Greece, you will be returned back to Turkey without any exceptions. And for every one person that will be returned, Europe will take one person from Turkey and resettle that person in Europe. And this person will be the most vulnerable, the person who is really in need, the person who have gone through security and social checks and identity verification and stuff like this. What really bothers me, and it's a terrible thing, even with the whole legal torture that's over there, is the fact that we are not taking those people. So we have made a commitment that we are not fulfilling. We are not fulfilling this commitment because most of the member states or some of the member states are strictly against those resettlements that came to be known as quotas, but what's basically behind this is the fact that let's have a system that creates a safe and legal passage for people who are most in need to come to Europe from a really troubled region. We don't see that happening, and I don't see any brave politicians in the region willing to say this aloud. And maybe at the end of the day, Europe will stand together, but I don't know whether Schengen will stay together, because what the bottom line of this is that some states will say that, okay, we will be taking those people, but because we need to check whether the irregulars come or not come to our member states, so whether they come to Germany or whether they come to France or Spain or Portugal, we will have to have borders and border controls within the Schengen area, and this will be a problem also. Maybe then Slovaks and V4 countries and politicians will notice that we have a problem.
Zuzka, you wanted to respond?
Well, actually, I would like to maybe focus from the legal issues of this back again to humans, because for me also the reason why we have Rasha here today is that we can see that she is an individual person, somebody like me or you, and the major problem of the current crisis in Europe, I think, is the attitude we have to the people who are out there, to the Syrians, to the Afghans. There is no solidarity. That's clear maybe to many of others, we have heard it, but for me the solidarity means that I understand a Syrian person as my partner, as a person who is equal to me. It's not somebody who is out there, who is coming through the sea and we should like look at him or her from top. Those people are our partners, they are our fellow human beings, they are like us. And all the politics we are inventing, which shall be about them, should recognize this important aspect that they have the same human dignity and same position, they have their own aspiration, they have their own ideas, plans for future, relatives that were lost or are in danger, and we should recognize this and really think about what the words we are using, how we are treating them, and whether those policies that we would like to apply to them, whether we would apply them to us or to our children. That's the core to me.
Thank you very much for saying this, Zuzana. Martin, with this I get to your campaigning. You spent basically winter and springtime of last year and this year traveling around Slovakia. And what I like about your writing on these security issues, on refugee issues, is that you are not just criticizing those who are, for example, opposing. They will say they view refugees as enemies or as threat, danger for their existence, for their jobs, or whatever. You're trying to understand. You're trying to look at the reasons why it is like this. Why? Oops, sorry for that. Why these people feel like in the poor regions of Slovakia, in the east, in the southeast, or elsewhere. You talk to hundreds of people, and how was your perspective after you came back? Many of them view Slovakia as a failed state, in the issues of healthcare and the issues of education, unemployment. They feel like the state is not able to provide them with the basic needs they have, and in many regions of Slovakia. And I'm not surprised. That's the fact. So how do you try to explain to them that this is not a threat? This is an opportunity as well.
Well, I would not claim that I understand the Slovak mind or anything, but let's
You're
have
trying
a
to
conversation.
understand.
Yes. In my experience, most of the you have a angry minority that is really vocal about this issue, but most people don't care about this, and they are just fired up by the politicians, as I said before. But okay, let's leave this group aside. What was really interesting is that people like to have a conversation about this issue and have an open and honest conversation about this issue, and they felt, and for example, in Gabčíkovo, which was a small town in southern Slovakia, that the government decided that will settle some of the Austrian asylum seekers, but in Slovakia. So, and there were without any communications from the ministry, suddenly people came in. And then they had a referendum, and they rejected the local village rejected the people, and nobody had a conversation about them. Then they are angry because they have no information. Nobody's talking to them as equal citizens, and nobody's doing some kind of reach out. I guess if what's needed here is people have to have a conversation, have to understand the arguments. Of course, we have to call out any lies and hoaxes and stuff like that, but we need to talk. And what was really interesting is that when you had, angry people at debates and panel discussions and something like this, they came up later on and they said, okay, I don't agree with you maybe, but I understand it more, and I see that you are not a crazy person, but you understand also the financial and security and cultural ramifications of any policies that we might implement in Slovakia. So, but, again, I don't want to take a too simplistic view on that, but I really feel it's not about Slovak people who are conservative or fascist or anything. I really don't like this narrative. To me, it's mostly about the politicians who create this fear, because really you have countries that had no experience or no major experience with migration, and they were able to cope with it. Or you have seen it in Gabčíkovo. Does anyone, it's a year now or so, we have people in Gabčíkovo. Nobody ever heard about Gabčíkovo since September. Nobody ever heard about Nitra, maybe for some problems, or about any of Zuzka's clients who are doing perfectly well. But then you suddenly see a politician who is not able to solve his problems, to do his job, to move this country forward, and then he's looking for any scapegoat. We have seen this before with Hungarians, we have seen it with Romas, we have seen it with Brussels, and we now see it with refugees. And all the time we have see the same story, and we should do something about it, because to me it's like one of the biggest problems in Slovak political discourse as such, that we are not concentrating on issues that matter, but on emotions and Facebook likes and stuff like this.
Martin, you are one of the few people in Slovakia who are actively writing on the security issues or on the border issues.
Yeah.
Zuzka mentioned Schengen. Schengen really is in threat. You know, we had this during election campaign in Slovakia. Suddenly, our prime minister and the Ministry of Interior were building this absurd fences for millions of euros to show us that we have this, you know, bulletproof, whatever, special huge fence which we can build anytime, and a country which was behind Iron Curtain suddenly wants to build new fences. Hungary did already. Do you really think that Schengen, which we used to love for so many years, is now in danger also for Slovakia? And don't you think that we have a Minister of Interior who is most probably very corrupted and who is absolutely not dealing with these serious issues which Slovakia is facing?
Yeah, okay, so many issues. So first of all, the simple fact is that fences will never stop migration. What stops migration is that you solve the pull and push issues, whether you solve the problems in the origin countries or whether you create a system that is not, you know, enticing people to come in huge numbers. But I don't think that it's really a European problem. But anyone who is saying to you that I will build a wall, but you know, there's a politician in the United States who is saying that's currently running for president, I will build a wall and it's going to be huge and beautiful. And it's just so ironic that you basically have the same conversation in Europe, but in a more like Euro bureaucratic language, which is a small border and what a smart border and initiatives and stuff like this. You know, you can create, and it's really good that we are doing that we are having a coordinated border protection system, and we have border controls and border coast guard and stuff like this. It's really good. But if anyone's saying to you that this will stop the issue, I don't think that he's lying, and most certainly he knows that he's lying. And what's amazing in this debate is that the position that I'm advocating and Zuzana is advocating is actually from the national security perspective is also the position that makes more sense. That if you don't want irregular people crossing your borders from regions which they have to leave because they are in danger. If you don't want to have radicalization and spread of terrorism in shanty towns of refugee camps that are in horrid conditions, you have to solve this issue, and legal and sustainable ways of safe passage is a way how to do it. You can create hotspots in Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey. You can check the people. You can pick, because we cannot save everyone, but we can save the most vulnerable ones, and you can bring them safely into Europe after they have been checked, vetted, and we are prepared to integrate them in our societies. And you know, this is a sensible way from the national perspective, not to close your borders. And you know, even the most nationalist politicians in Slovakia will say, just, you know, create even our own border, and our secret service and our police will take care of terrorism, because we are doing so good with this alone. You know, a coordinated European approach that is sensible, that is sustainable, and that you know, checks for everything that can go wrong is something that we have to go forward. But unfortunately, again, you know, national politicians are not brave enough to say this aloud and go forward with this.
Rasha, we mentioned Schengen, we mentioned borders. You flew yesterday by a low-cost airline from Berlin directly to Bratislava. How is actually your status right now in living in Germany? You got the asylum already, or you want to become a German citizen? What are your chances? What is your so to say position right now?
Well, I got a residency permit for 3 years now in Germany. After 3 years, it may be like I may get an extension, hopefully. And in that case, there is a possibility to like become a citizen, but that will be after maybe 6 or 7 years. I'm not sure about the law yet. All what I know is I still have 2 years staying in Germany. After that, I have no idea what will happen.
And traveling to other countries means you can now, in the European Union, in Schengen borders,
yeah, I can travel. Yeah.
And maybe you could say a little bit on your writing in Germany. How is your everyday life? Are you a freelance writer now, or do you have a job now? Because it's very different from most of the other Syrians living in Germany who are mostly in the closed camps, some of them quite desperate because they cannot leave these camps and these facilities. Some of them are in quite bad shape, so you basically live freely in Berlin. Your book is about life in the hipster Berlin and about the arts.
You are making me feel guilty.
No, it's
Your
not.
Your book is good. You are living free. Other people are living.
No, it's great for you. It's yeah.
Well, actually, here again, not like the good situation you have, like the privileged situation, give you some advance, even in this and when you are in Germany. Like, as you said, that's right. Like, in the time I'm living freely and working as a freelancer, writer and editor, and there are other people like struggling to find a chance and trying to find a work, or they have to live at the camps and everything. So yeah, it's so different in that case.
And what about German language? I know you already learned the word Wurst, which is very important in a German society.
Yeah, and for me.
So are you learning, do you have to learn German to get integrated, or is it like your decision?
No, it's not my decision. I have to, actually I like to also, because you have to learn the language in the society you are living in. And but I'm doing this so slow. I should have done this before, but I'm so lazy, and I'm still an Arts Vice student, but I'm doing my best to try to learn it more.
And now living in Berlin, do you meet a lot of Syrians in Berlin, or are you like trying to be you meeting all the international people living there? Do you have any contact to Syrian community?
Sure, in Berlin, it's the case always. You have international friends. It's like the atmosphere of the city. And sure, also you have some Syrian friends. And friends, you know, even there are people I know since the days of Damascus, and I met them again in Berlin. They settled there. But to tell you something funny about the societies which came from kind of a complicated kind of situation, it's not always so easy to connect, because you come with lots of problems and there is a lot of tension, and all what this happens and everything made us a lot like really sensitive people. Some other people are kind of not really aggressive in the violent way, but there is some complications. So sometimes it's not so easy as many people think just to have a Syrian community together. It's not so easy. Actually, the friends I had till now who left are maybe just 2 or 3 or something. So this kind of human relationship can be hard sometimes.
You know, maybe this is going to be the last question because we are running out of time, but you know, for many years for us living here in the Eastern Europe, Germany was in many ways an example of you know, the right integration, of the being very liberal, being very modern, land of ideas. And after the refugee crisis, this changed a lot. You know, there are lots of right-wing parties on the rise, like AfD, and there are many massive demonstrations in Dresden and Leipzig and other German cities, especially in the eastern part of Germany. How is it to look at this rise of right-wing extremism or populism around Europe, in France, in Austria, in Slovakia, in Germany, from the point of view of someone who is, so to say, the target of many of these movements?
Watching the media and knowing all this happening, and like here a bus including refugees was attacked, and a camp attacked here or burned there, it's sure like make you feel I don't know, like feel scared and feel the future is not going to be good. But the thing I rely on actually is the people I deal with daily, and what I realized is this sense, especially people who are not really like strictly had a political position, like really leftist or really rightist, like it's like a majority of people. So their actual like normal sense, it's very good. They are one of the best I've dealt with in the country. So I always rely on this fact to try to be optimistic a little bit, and it's not all what's going on the media really represents what's happening. I know how if you just focus on those news, you might feel like something horrible is going on in Germany, but at least in my experience, the daily life was not like this.
Thank you very much. We had this beautiful soundtrack by Janáček Philharmonics from Brno for our discussion. Ak by ste chceli ešte zažiť Rashu Abbas v trošku inej polohe ako spisovateľku, ako autorku, dnes o 6:30 večer tu v stane Martinus, v literárnom stane, budeme čítať jej poviedku, ktorú som preložil do slovenčiny. Ona bude čítať v arabčine krátko a bude rozprávať v angličtine o svojej tvorbe. I just made a small announcement for our evening event here around the corner. Thank you very much for coming. Ďakujeme veľmi pekne, že ste takto početne prišli na našu debatu. To boli Zuzana Števulová, Rasha Abbas a Martin Dubéci. Poprosím vás o veľký potlesk pre nich. Thank you very much for joining us. Ďakujeme veľmi pekne.